Okay, hi everyone. This is a tutorial that covers the basics of adding interactivity to Flash files. So I'm going to presume that you already know how to create basic animation, perhaps motion tweens, simple things like that. And what we're going to cover in this tutorial is firstly how to set up your workspace for coding a website, working with symbols, and we're going to look at two types of symbols. In Flash we call them movie clips and buttons, and then Actionscript. And Actionscript is the coding language that we use in Flash mainly to create interactivity, to add interactive elements to a game or a website or any other thing that you might be coding. Okay, so we'll get started. First thing you'll want to do is create a new Actionscript 3 file. And we might look at putting together the workspace for coding first. So if you go to Window and choose Actions, you can get this Actions window popping up. And the Actions window is where we write the programming language code, the Actionscript, to add the features we want to our program. So what I like to do is drag the Actions window just over to the side, and you'll see that line appears in between my toolbar and my stage, and if I just let the mouse go there, it pops that window in between the other two. Scroll this over. Okay, so I've got my stage, got my space ready for my Actionscript code, and now we'll just look at creating perhaps a basic animation first. So I'm going to go to the oval tool and just draw the old ball. Then right click on frame 1, create a motion tween, and you'll see here it says the selected item cannot be tweened. You must convert this to a symbol. So you might have wondered what this actually means, converting to a symbol, why we have these things called symbols in Flash. So for now we'll just say yes. It'll become clearer what symbols are down the track, so we'll press OK. So this is now a symbol which has a motion tween of 24 frames, and just to do something simple I'll grab my selection tool and drag this down the page. Okay. So we've got so it's a ball falling down the page, and then we might create a new layer, little new layer button here, and I want something else to appear on frame 25. So we'll right click on frame 25 and put in a blank keyframe, remembering that a keyframe we use for when something changes. So the thing that's changing here is all of a sudden something is going to appear on this layer. So keyframe number 1 is blank, so everything's blank up until frame 25. This keyframe here is currently blank, but let's go ahead and draw something on there now. So instead of the oval, I'll click and hold, choose the rectangle tool, and just draw a rectangle. Now we're going to use this as a very simple button. So now we're going to convert this rectangle into a symbol. So if I select it with my selection tool, just click on it, and then go to my modify menu, convert to symbol, ask me to give it a name, let's call it button, and then the type here, there's 3 types of symbols we can use in Flash: movie clips, buttons, and graphics. We're going to cover movie clips and buttons, and we'll look at graphics at another stage. So this is a button. Tell Flash that this type of symbol that we're creating is a button. Just press OK. Alright, I'll go to Control Loop Playback and just press Enter on the keyboard to play the movie. So you can see currently we've just got the ball falling and then that button appearing on screen for a single frame. What we want to do is have the movie stop when it hits frame 25, stop at this point and wait for us to do something with the button. So here's our first bit of ActionScript code. It's always a good idea to put your ActionScript on a layer of its own, so I'm going to create a new layer and we'll double click here and rename it to code. And I want to apply code to frame 25, so we'll put in a blank keyframe at frame 25 because code actually sits inside keyframes in the same way that objects do. So now we'll select that keyframe, and in our actions window we'll type stop. So that's a simple bit of ActionScript that just tells Flash at this point in time we want to stop playback, stop at this frame. Now if you just play your movie, click over here, press enter, you see that it isn't actually stopping. The reason is that ActionScript does not get calculated or applied until we've actually tested our movie or run the movie. So if you go Control, Test Movie and choose Test, see now it's operating as we would expect. It's played the movie and stopped on that frame. Okay, so we've got a bit of ActionScript there. We've got a couple of symbols, a ball coming down the page and a button symbol. Let's dive into symbols a little bit further now. So you can see my 3 layers here that we've created. If I double click on my button symbol with the black selection tool, notice now my timeline looks very different. I've got up, over, down and hit. And if you look up at the top of the screen here, it says scene 1, and then next to it we now have button. And this is how Flash tells us that we have gone into a symbol. We've left our main timeline and we've gone into a new timeline which contains the symbol's own time. And what this represents in the case of a button symbol is the up, over, down and hit states. If you go ahead and put a keyframe in at up, over, down and hit, and then select your over keyframe and change your button. I'm just going to change the fill color. You could do anything you like, change its size, change the text, add something else. Let's draw something on it as well. Just draw little curls around the outside. Okay, so now our up state is blue, our over state is green, the down state is blue and the hit state is blue. And these represent what our mouse is doing. So the over state is what the button will do when the mouse moves over the button. The down state is what the button will do when the mouse clicks down. So let's maybe change that to red. So when the mouse is pressed down on the button with a click, the button will turn red. The hit area is what area the mouse needs to be rolled over for the button to activate. So you could have a hit area that's actually larger than the button, meaning the mouse doesn't actually need to go right over the button to be able to select it. But in most cases you want your hit state to be virtually the same as your up state. Okay, so let's go back to our scene by clicking on the scene 1 button. You see we've got our timeline back again. And we'll test our movie. Control, test movie, test. Plays through, there's our button, and you can see when I move the mouse over that our button activates when I click, turns red, so there's our up, over and down state. So the next thing we're going to want to do is to actually use ActionScript to tell Flash how to deal with this button when it's clicked. What are we actually going to do? So here's an explanation of the script. We've already put in our stop at this current frame, frame 25. Now what we do is we add an event listener. Now an event listener will listen for an event, and the common event that you will need is a mouse event, a mouse click. So what this is saying is the button that we call my button, we're going to listen for a mouse click for a mouse event, which is a click, and then we're going to perform a function at that point. The function that we're going to perform we've named go forth. You could call this whatever you want. And so when the button is clicked, we perform this function here. So go forth and go forth, you can see the two there. So this calls the function go forth, and the function performs this function, which is go to and play frame number. In this case we've got 2, we might make it 1 in our example to go back to frame 1. So I'll just copy and paste that code into our flash file. So we're going to stop at frame 25. And then the button, which is called my button, is going to listen for a mouse click. When we get our mouse click, we're going to perform the go forth function, which directs the playhead to go to and play frame number 1. The last thing we need to do, we've called our button here my button. So Flash needs to know which button on our page, so we've got 10 different buttons, which one is the one called my button, which we're listening for the mouse click on. If I select the button with the selection tool, in the properties up in the corner here you'll see instance name, and that's the name that the button will use to be referenced through Actionscript. So we called it my underscore button. So just put that in there, so this button, while this is selected, my button, and that's what links to this. So when the Actionscript is listening on the button called my button, it knows it's this button here. Let's test our movie. So movie plays through, waits on our button, and when we click on the button, back it goes again, plays through the movie again. So that's the basics of it. You can add more keyframes, you can have multiple buttons. I suppose the next exercise would be to add a few buttons and create a site that is interactive. So you might have a home page, an about us page, that sort of thing, or you could create some little adventure game type thing. So the other thing I wanted to briefly talk about, we've looked at the button symbol. The other symbol that you will find useful when you're producing this kind of work is a movie clip symbol. Now movie clip symbol, just like a button symbol, it contains its own timeline. So remember, if I double click on my button here with the selection tool, the timeline for the button shows up here. So we've got up, over, down and hit. This is an interactive type timeline that controls different states the button can have. The movie clip symbol also has its own timeline, but it works in a different way. So I'm just going to once again draw a ball on the page. Actually I will, always a good idea to put things on unique layers, so I'll create a new layer and we'll put a blank keyframe in at frame 25. Okay, and draw our ball onto there. So this frame here, keyframe at 25, we've created a ball. Now I'm going to select the ball with the selection tool and modify convert to symbol, and this time we've looked at the button symbol, we'll create a movie clip symbol. Red ball. Okay, so once again this symbol I've just created has its own timeline. So look here, when I double click on the ball with the selection tool, in the top left hand corner it flashes telling me I'm no longer in my scene 1, I'm now in the red ball timeline, and the timeline itself has changed. We've only got one layer now, which is the layer containing that ball that we've drawn. We'll do our motion tween, create a motion tween and move the ball, let's say move it down at frame 10 and move it with the arrow keys on the keyboard. and then at frame 24 just move it back up. I can see where my original starting point was, so I'll just move it back up to there so we get a bouncing ball. Okay, so this symbol has 24 frames, the ball bouncing up and down. If I jump back to scene 1 and see that although the ball bounces up and down, it only exists on my main timeline for a single frame. It's only sitting there on frame 25. However, because we have told through Actionscript told the movie to stop at frame 25, the ball will sit there animating its own little timeline, as you can see if we test our movie. Control, test movie, test. So there the ball sits there with its own little timeline running around, and once again if we click our button, the scene plays through again. So that's how movie clip symbols work.